As most of you guys already know, my name is Hannah Noor, and I am a first-year medical student here at the University of Central Florida College of Medicine, and I am also a critical thinking fellow at the Ayaan Hirsi Ali Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that works to protect women from genital mutilation, honor violence, and forced marriage with an overall emphasis on liberty for all. As a fellow, I work to advance freedoms and human rights both in the US and around the world, which brings us to today's event. Now, we are in an age where differing opinions are often equated with ill intent, an age where extreme polarization is stripping us of civil discourse. In today's event, on how to have impossible conversations, we will work to bridge the moral divide and rekindle the art of civil discourse. Now, today's speaker is Peter Boghossian. Peter is a founding faculty member at the University of Austin and the director of the National Progress Alliance. He has a teaching degree spanning more than 25 years that focuses on the Socratic method, scientific skepticism, and critical thinking. Peter's dissertation explored increasing the moral reasoning of prison inmates and aiding their desistance from crime. His more recent book is How to Have Impossible Conversations, and his writing can be found in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Scientific American, Time Magazine, National Review, and elsewhere. His work is centered on bringing the tools of professional philosophers to a wide variety of contexts to help people think through what seem to be intractable problems. Introducing Peter Boghossian.
Can everybody hear me okay? Press the button. I'm a little technologically impaired. I really do think it's the cold. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Flip it around, okay. Wow, my fingers are literally so cold that I'm having trouble manipulating them. Okay, all right, so what we're gonna do is I'll teach you how to speak across the divide. I just came up with those right before folks walked in. I tried to think about the most controversial things that I could. I apologize if I've left out any major controversies, but I think that those, or if I have and you want to talk about those, we can certainly do those, so that's no problem. And then we have a voting. If you want to tweet that out, you're certainly welcome to, or put it in whatever social media platforms. So let's do this. The first thing I'm going to do is, so I've used this, I published a paper on this, a peer-reviewed paper on this. This is a really good way to build a consensus among people. Specifically among people who don't agree with a topic. So it's a version of what's called the Delphi technique, where you go through multiple iterations of a process to gain consensus of and among people who wouldn't ordinarily agree with something. So we have a bunch of topics up there. When triaging Black lives are more important than white lives, individuals under 18 should be allowed to medically transition to a different sex, etc. So, I don't know, so it's 12:11. So let me just tell you my plan. I'm gonna show you how to do the exercise. We're gonna do the exercise, and I know there's a mandatory class at 1, so anybody who stays, I'm gonna teach you how to do it so you can do it to other people. And I would never ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And if you see from the videos that we put out, I frequently hand people the microphone after they've done this, and then they can do it to me. So I'll teach you how to play this game or do this process with other people. So Reed, how are we doing on the voting? Okay, cool. I'll show you the Delphi technique. This is a really cool thing that we can do. But we need to do it quickly. So we're going to do 2 or 3 iterations. I'm not sure. It's going to depend. And we're going to vote on these claims. Oh, you can add tallies. Oh, that's perfect. God, Reed is like MacGyver. Okay, so everybody, this first iteration gets 2 votes, and then we're gonna change the number of votes. So if you want, when triaging Black lives are more important than white lives, raise your hand to do the exercise with. You don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to, so I'm just gonna whip through these. Abortion should be legal in the third trimester. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In patient care, knowing a person's race is more important than knowing their social class. 1. Men can get pregnant. 14, try to raise your hand at once so I don't miscount. The MCAT should be removed from consideration in medical school admissions. I'm amazed every hand didn't go up for that. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 9, less qualified individuals should be admitted to medical school to further diversity goals. It doesn't mean you agree with this, it just means you want to talk about it. 12. Individuals under 18 should be allowed to medically transition to a different sex. Wow, 19. The Hippocratic Oath should be replaced, should be a D there, I left it out, by an equity oath. 1, surprised at that. Minors should be allowed to receive gender-affirming care without parental notification. 18. Wikipedia is a good place to get medical information. Again, you don't have to agree, it's just we want to talk about it. 2, physicians should lie to patients if doing so would improve patient health outcomes. 1. 2. Remember, you only get 2 votes. Gain of function research is ethical. 1. Requests of trans patients for trans doctors should be honored. 0. I would be willing to have, in other words, cut in half my salary for a minor increase in patient health outcomes. No, 0. Race is a valid biological category. 2. COVID vaccine should be mandatory. 1. Obesity is a medical condition. I'm going to vote for that one. So everybody, when you do this, everybody gets a vote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Requests of white patients for white doctors should be honored. 0. Physicians should lie to patients if doing so would improve patient care. 0. Physicians should discuss weight with patients who are obese. 1. Physicians should discuss smoking with patients who smoke. 3. If a female patient requests a female doctor, she should be provided one. 0. Requests of black patients for black doctors should be honored. 1. Hospitals should be allowed to deny certain services on religious grounds, for example, birth control. 0. In a conflict between saving a life and losing my medical license, I would save a life. 1. The healthcare system, is systematically racist. 11. Big pharma hurts more than it helps. 5. Okay, so here's what you do. The next thing you do, and again, the idea is we're going to build a consensus, not that you agree with this, and then I'm going to show you how to play this thinking game. So you just basically eyeball it. In other words, you just look at this, and immediately you delete anything with a 0. So if it has a 0, you just delete it. So can you delete those? So one of the things, the goals of this process is that everybody will feel ownership in the outcome, even if they disagree, because it was a fair process from the get-go. And when I did this in the prisons, I made sure that the secretary, the superintendent, everybody received a vote. Okay, so the second thing you do is you go through multiple iterations depending on how many people you're dealing with. So if you're dealing with a large number of people, you can go through 3 or maybe even 4 iterations. But it's important each time you do, you decrease the number of votes people have. And the reason for that is it just becomes more efficient. So we're going to do this one more time. So like, look, so you see the ones, you can delete the ones. Everybody see the idea? Get the idea? And so at the end, even if none of the questions he voted for example, he'll still feel that because the process was fair, he'll be willing to engage in whatever the outcome is. Okay, let's do this one more time. Okay, so delete the ones, Reed. And then the 0 down there. So physicians should lie to patients. Awesome. All right, and then, I didn't mean it was awesome, they should lie to patients. And then see, can you reset those to 0 or no? Okay, while he resets those to 0, I'm going to talk about how to do this. So this is a spectrum. It's like a Likert scale. And in the middle is neutral. And then you have slightly disagree, disagree, strongly disagree, slightly agree, agree, strongly agree. What we're going to do with these claims is we're going to, after we get a vote on which claims we're going to do, people are going to stand on the neutral line. I'll read the claims off, and then you'll go to a side. Now, the game is very, very simple. It only has 2 rules. You can move anytime you want, or you cannot move at all. You can just decide to stay on the neutral line if you want the whole time, that's fine. However, if you choose to move, you have to commit to a full line. You can't, cheat or hedge the game or turn around. You got to commit to one full line. The second rule is I'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move, and everybody moves at the same time. And the reason for that is we don't want the people in the back to be influenced by the people in the front. We want everybody to make their own decisions without being externally influenced. All right, so let's go back to these. Ready, Reed? Yeah. Okay. Now everybody gets 1 vote. If we had a little more time, which we don't, we'd do 3 iterations. So this is these questions, again, not to agree, but we're going to apply this soon. Individuals under 18 should be allowed to medically transition to a different sex. If you want to talk about this, raise your hand. 1. Wow, surprising. Abortion should be legal in the 3rd trimester. 9. Less qualified individuals should be admitted to medical school to further diversity goals. 2. Men can get pregnant. 0, right? So already we know that's not going to be discussed. The MCAT should be removed from consideration in medical school admissions. 2. Wikipedia is a good place to get medical information. 0. Race is a valid biological category. 2. Physicians should discuss smoking with patients who smoke. 0. Obesity is a medical condition. 4. The healthcare system is systematically racist. 7. Big pharma hurts more than it helps. 1. Minors should be allowed to receive gender-affirming care without parental notification. 6. Did you have your hand up for that one? Okay, 6. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We'll go, 9, 7, 6. We'll just go in order. And at 1, I know people have to leave, so I want to expedite this. And then if you do stay, I'll teach you how to do this, and you can do this when you teach. It's an incredibly good exercise, as you'll see in a minute. It's extremely useful. I've literally gone all over the world and do this, and I've never had a single person say, that sucked. Everybody enjoys it. Okay, so let's do the first claim. Abortion should be legal in the 3rd trimester. So if you want to talk about the claim, abortion should be legal in the 3rd trimester, raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So come on down. The maximum we can do is 5. 4 is ideal. 5. We can do 5 if you want to. Come on down and stand on the neutral line. All right, now line up by height. We're height discriminating against people here. No, it's just so that everybody can see. No, don't go there yet. Don't go there yet. So stand on the, okay. Okay, so I'm going to count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move, and you move. Try to move all at once. And everybody gets strongly agree and strongly agree and strongly disagree. The claim is abortion should be legal in the 3rd trimester. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move. Okay. Tell everybody. So what you'd normally do is if there was someone over here, I'd say tell them why you. But obviously I don't know anybody here, and then we don't have anybody there. But you would get people to talk this way. But we don't have anybody, so tell them. Tell everybody why you think abortion should be legal in the 3rd trimester. Oh. Hold on.
Especially coming from the medical perspective, we've learned about so many things that can happen that are unpredictable, like tragic, and you cannot put a ban on something without knowing the whole condition that it's affecting, especially something that's as broad as any type of abortion in the 3rd trimester. So that's ridiculous. Like, you will not have the same amount of information and insight that the doctor and the patient will have. So like, just legalize it, just saying this is absolutely never acceptable is not the way to do it.
Can you tell everybody of an example that you're thinking, because I think you have something in mind. Like, can you tell everybody an example? Like you said, there are so many things could happen. Like, what could happen?
Premature rupture of the membranes. You could have someone who goes into labor early and then the fetus dies. And then if you don't get the products of conception out, they're going to die too. Just a lot of late-term complications, or even fetal abnormalities that aren't discovered until much, much later, or just things like that don't show up until the 3rd trimester, that you have no way to account for until you get to the 3rd trimester.
Okay, so I think I understood. I have zero medical knowledge, but I think I understood. Did you agree not with her position, but with her reasoning?
I think for the most part, I think it's just dangerous to make broad legality when it comes to healthcare, because the specifics when it comes to a patient are far more complicated than what you can put on a piece of paper. And banning something will hurt more folks than it helps.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a second. How come you're on the agree line and not the strongly agree or the slightly agree?
I think I tend to drift away from the binary end of it. So I think there may be some exception of which I haven't thought of, and I think that's worth being mindful of, but in general agreeing with pretty much all the same sentiments.
Was the example that she gave, was that a sufficient example? And I'm medically ignorant, but there could be some medical circumstance that we couldn't think of that would require an abortion in the 3rd trimester. Do you accept that as true?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay, so if you accept that as true, then the claim abortion should be legal in the 3rd trimester would admit of an example, so you should move to the strongly agree line.
I'm almost willing to say she should come to the agree line.
Tell her why. Tell her why.
If she agreed with my train of thought there, then perhaps we could meet, we can't meet somewhere in the middle.
No, not in this game. No.
Yeah. So at least for me, I think I don't know. Given the exceptions, I'm pretty comfortable.
Okay.
Here, I guess.
Okay. Why are you on the agree line?
Because I agree with her reasoning that there are medical exceptions and reasons why there should be abortion in the 3rd trimester. But I'm only on the agree line because I think that there's other circumstances where we're not considering, like if the baby was completely healthy or the mother was completely healthy and all the other circumstances were correct. I believe that maybe the mom could deliver to term, possibly.
Okay. Is the reasoning that she gave that the baby could be healthy and the mother could be healthy, is that sufficient to move you to the agree line?
Not in the terms of legality, no.
Why?
Because we're talking about legal repercussions. We're not saying, oh, this is a personal decision. I'm saying that it's kind of what you said, where if you're putting in legislation, you cannot say in this case and in this case and in this case. I think the broad legislation should be up to the doctor and the mother, because no doctor will perform an abortion on a healthy mother and a healthy 3rd month trimester infant. That's not a thing that happens. So I don't think that's something you need to account for in the legal term. if that makes sense.
Okay, what argument could they give? What could they say to you that would move you to the agree? What would you have to learn? What piece of evidence would you have to encounter to move you one line to the right, to the agree?
I will say it's pretty tough. There's a reason why I volunteered for this one. This is kind of a strongly held belief. I understand the reasoning of wanting to limit abortions, period, but I don't think making it illegal to have them in certain trimesters is the way to do that. If you said, like, oh, if we had guaranteed prenatal care, guaranteed contraceptive counseling, like guaranteed education, where it's like we've done everything else that we can to try to prevent this, I could see where you would say, okay, maybe we should put in another measure, but like not with the way things are now.
So you would or would not be willing to move to the agree?
Would not.
Okay, what would you say about somebody who is on the strongly disagree, and if I asked them what would it take you to move to the disagree, they would say nothing?
And repeat the question?
Like if someone were on the strongly disagree line, and which unfortunately we don't have anyone, because if they did, this is exactly what I would ask them. If someone were standing here and I said to them, what would it take you to move to the disagree line? And they responded to me, nothing. What would you think about that? What would your impression be?
I would hope that their personal feelings about it would not go into how they treat their patients, just because this is something else where, as healthcare providers, we have to make sure that we are doing what's legal, but also keeping our personal beliefs and biases out of how we treat patients. So as long as they are keeping like all of their equity and like patient care okay, there's not much I can do about someone who's not going to change their mind.
And would they say the same thing about you on the strongly agree?
I would hope so. I hope that if they can believe that whatever I believe, like I'm giving the best care I can to patients, I'm not actively harming them, I'm giving them all the information I can, and if I feel like I'm not able to provide that, I would refer them out to someone who could. Okay,
let's do this. I want to do something. Let's reset to the neutral, please. Everybody go back to the neutral. So we just did the claim, abortion should be legal in the third trimester. I want to reset the claim, and please don't move until I say move. Abortion should be legal up until the last day of the third trimester. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move. Well, that's quite interesting. But by the way, I did this claim based upon what you said. That's how I pulled the claim. Why did you move?
Because what we said earlier, that this is more of a legal matter and that it always should be legal. I wasn't realizing we weren't talking about more like the ethics of it or like all circumstances, but there shouldn't be like a doctor shouldn't be at risk of losing their life or losing their license for trying to save a life of the mother.
Why did you move?
Pretty much the same reasoning, yeah.
Huh. Interesting. Is there anything that would cause you two to move to the agree?
No.
I think if it's a conversation purely about like legality, then I see the rationale for strongly agree. Versus if it's, yeah.
Okay. Okay, give him a hand. Thanks. Give him a hand. Okay, so that's basically what it's like. It's a rough template of how the exercises go. We're going to pop up another claim, and we're going to run through that claim. The healthcare system is systematically racist. Who wants to volunteer? Okay, 1, 2, 1, 2. Anybody else? All right, 3. That's the spirit. So as you can see from this, there's no gotchas. It's just pretty straightforward, asking people if the reasons they have for their beliefs warrant the confidence in their beliefs. Okay, so by height? Sorry about that.
You do not have to laugh.
Sorry about that. Okay, so don't move until I say move, and just remember, commit to any line. The healthcare system is systematically racist. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move. Okay. All right. Tell us why. Well, first of all, tell us what you mean by, or how you interpret systemically or systematically racist.
Right. So The way that I mean like systematically racist is that like you as a patient, you can encounter racism from pretty much anyone within the healthcare system because some like either racist policies or kind of like racist training, education are so baked into the field that, you can be actively anti-racist, or you could be a person without, you could actively try to be without bias, but like it's baked into the education, it's baked into the institution.
Can you give folks an example so that it would help them understand? Like, give them an example of a specific policy currently in place of an example that's racist and baked into the system.
Yeah. So I think something that we talk about is eGFR. And so estimated GFR is a calculation that's used in like nephrology, basically as a measure of your kidney function. And there's something in it called like basically like an African American adjustment. And this is something that's kind of a big contention right now in the medical field about whether or not we should be adjusting the eGFR value for African American patients. It's based on the assumption that there's some fundamental difference between like the muscle mass and kidney function between African Americans versus everyone else. But they've never been able to pinpoint that. And if you look back into the history of eGFR and other race-based adjustments, there's also an adjustment for spirometry, which is like for respiration, that also assumes that black people have weaker lungs. If you go back to the history...
Not history, like...
Yeah. So, but the thing is like these things are baked in, but they don't have evidence for... Like we don't have like a biological underpinning for why we believe these things. They exist because of a historical reason.
And so I just want to make sure I'm clear, because when I ask everybody questions, I want to make sure I understand. So and I'm not a physician, so it has to kind of dumb it down for me. So the idea is that there are examples, and if this is not correct, let me know. That there are examples of systemic racism baked into the system because there are certain metrics or indices that physicians base their treatment on that draw from racial categories of which there is insufficient evidence to warrant the belief that those categories actually exist.
I can actually give a great example right now.
Please.
Let's say you have two identical individuals. They're identical in every way, right? 45-year-old white male, 45-year-old black male. And they have the exact same creatinine, sodium levels, everything, right? If they're on an organ transplant list, let's say they're getting a simultaneous liver and kidney transplant, exact same numbers. Every single parameter is the exact same. eGFR will calculate that black patient's kidney function as being worse, and so they would be placed better?
As being better, so that they won't get the kidney because it seems like their liver function is better, but it's not better, or their kidney function is better. Yeah.
Thank you. It's confusing. But yeah, so like that is like an example of like there being, like with the exact same metrics, it kind of affects your placement on the transplant list.
I just want to dwell on this because I'm trying to understand this. So if it could be shown that there were biological differences, and I don't think race is a useful category, but if there could be shown that there were biological differences among peoples whose ancestors developed as a consequence of different evolutionary pressures, and that manifested itself in specific ways in the body, would you be willing to revise your belief?
Yeah, and I think there are ethnic differences, right? Like there are SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, right, that are significantly more common in certain ethnicities. Sickle cell trait, and the gene for that is
Tay-Sachs syndrome.
Yeah. These are all found in specific populations. But race is an identifier. There's more genetic variation within races than between races.
So, and I'm coming to you in a second, but this is complicated, and I want to make sure we get it right. So if that's the case, then the problem that you have with this statement is and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm trying to understand this. The problem that you have with this statement is that race as a category, when I say systematically racist, is that you think that category confuses and obfuscates things such that it benefits people whose ancestors did not have historical oppression variables. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say that, and I just gave like one example. There are other examples of systematic racism. If I have time for this thing, I'll also give an example of like in dermatology. If darker skin, predominantly like of the darkest skin types, are typically understudied, and so like if you look at a medical textbook, you're more likely to get. Let me give an example of a condition like psoriasis. Psoriasis presents very differently in patients with lighter skin than in dark skin. However, if you go into a medical textbook, you are much more likely to not have a atlas image with a patient of color, or especially of like darker skin tone. And so if you're a dermatologist, you're less likely to be trained, and so therefore, if you have a darker skin tone. But like what I'm like, and who, do you get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. So, and you think that that's evidence of systemic racism?
Yeah, because that's baked into the institution, right? Like the institution that educated the dermatologist didn't have a equitable or equal kind of representation of skin tone.
Hold on. I was right up with you until you made until you lumped those together. So, I suppose real quick, and then I'm getting to, I promise. Real quick, how do you define racist?
How I define racist?
Because the second example, I don't know, like when people traffic in the word racist in common parlance, I don't know if there'd be a consensus among people that the second example would be racist.
So I'd say it's like racism is like an unfair or an illegitimate malign or prejudice against a certain racial group.
And do you think that the example of psoriasis and skincare was a malign? Did you think it was malintent?
I think it was malign. I don't know if necessarily it was intentional. I would say because the field of dermatology has been around for a very long time, and for a very long time we've held the idea of studying skin of color in particular is a new thing. That's a new focus, and so we have to kind of undo years of prejudice and racism in the field.
So if it's a new thing, is it becoming more common?
A little bit. We still have a lot of strides to make.
So that would mean that would that determine the degree of racism? Like if more strides were being made to study people who have dark skin in the arena of dermatology, would that mean that the system is becoming less racist?
I think the system is becoming less racist. Okay. I think we're headed in a good direction.
Okay. All right. Sorry it took me so long. I apologize. I just wanted to clarify. The healthcare system is systemically racist. Tell us why you think so.
Yes. I agree with everything that he said. And in addition to, I feel like since we already make up such little of the population of doctors and nurses. We as in minorities, African Americans specifically. I feel like there's also like a sense of ignorance that plays into this racism because a lot of people aren't educated and aren't educating themselves and the different things that they would need to treat this population. And then, like, for example, there was a study done in like 2018 that surveyed like doctors, residents, medical students, and asked like, black people have thicker skin than white people, yes or no? And 61% said yes.
Among physicians?
Yes, and medical students. And like, so that was 2018. That was not even that long ago, and people still believe that. And then also, like, there's just not enough black people in the field who are doctors in order to combat that. And then they're also not making efforts to...
Hold on a second. Would a black person be needed to combat that? Or is that a truth that anybody could come to?
I mean, it's not truth. It's false.
Right. So in other words, it's in the domain of truth or falsity. Would you need to be black to identify that as false?
No, you don't need to be, but it's definitely when you have like an out group versus an in group, when you have someone who's in that out group come into your group and explain to you the norms of that culture, that society, it definitely makes it easier and helps bridge the gap. I don't think it's the responsibility of any person of minority to educate the majority, but that's just in this country, that's just how it is. And so if you were to bring more people of that into your spaces and you could interact with them more, you would understand where the flaw is in your knowledge. Because if you have something that you agree with and everyone around you also agrees with it, but you're all wrong, there's no one to tell you that you're wrong.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I understand this. So I haven't read the 2018 study, so I can't speak to it. I'm sorry. So is it more likely, and you'd have to get granular on the data, but is it more or less likely that black people would believe black people have thicker skin? Because if it were equally likely, then increasing the representation of black people would not combat that myth.
I feel like it's less likely that definitely less likely. Hello? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and the way that we would figure out if it were less likely is that you'd have to come to that conclusion through science, through data, right? Because it could just be a cultural myth that people believe independent of their race. I'm not saying it is because I don't know the data, but it could be.
A cultural thing? There's
Well, it could be like
there's no one culture that fits all types of black people.
Okay, so causally, what would be responsible for people holding that belief, if not a cultural?
Yeah, I have no idea why people believe that. I'm not them, and I don't believe it. So
I've never heard it until right now, but okay. All right, cool, thanks. So the healthcare system is systemically racist, or systematically what? Tell us why you strongly agree.
So originally, I was also going to touch upon the points that the majority of research that has taken place in the 20th, 21st century and previously has all been conducted, the majority has been conducted on white males, and thus both the gender demographics of male-female as well as race demographics of black, Asian, brown have been piled onto what it looks like in a male who is white, who presents the way that a white male may, and can lead to all sorts of misdiagnoses as far as what they were discussing in derm. There's cardiology implications, nephrology. But since those have been touched upon, I'm going to go the political, social route and discuss how socioeconomic barriers throughout specifically the U.S.'s history have intentionally created a system in which it is more difficult for black individuals in particular, as well as Native Americans actually, to have access to educational opportunities, the finances to fund higher education, to allow them to access degrees in research, in medicine, so that they can explore things that have to do with their own cultures, with their backgrounds, their environments, places, and people that are consistently overlooked because, for example, if you are an African American and you have historical ties to the U.S. back through the 1800s, then you could have family members who were slaves and then sharecroppers and then were redlined, were denied bank loans, were denied housing in good or what was considered safe areas, whose rents were made to go up so that they couldn't leave the areas that they occupied. The fact that it once was that urban cities were populated by white individuals, and when black individuals started gaining monetary advancements and business holdings, the white flight occurred and they ran to the suburbs. And so all these things that that denied people the opportunity to get to places where they could represent people of color.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. So we have three claims. The main claim we're taking a look at is the healthcare system is systematically racist, and we have three basic. I mean, there are others, but roughly, people of color are not sufficiently represented within the healthcare industry, and then from that, socioeconomic barriers prevent people of color access to medical education, and then parallel to the first reason, you have most medical studies use only white males, and that's a historical claim. Okay, so let's break this down. So what would the healthcare system look like if we're not systemically racist? What would it look like?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Here, face this way. Tell them.
What would the system look like?
What would the system, how would we know that we've extirpated all the vestiges of systemic racism?
Well, I guess assuming it's kind of hard to measure something, because there's an independent variable, there's an dependent variable, right? The independent variable is are you being racist? And then the dependent variable is the outcomes, obviously, right? And so I want to say equitable outcomes between the races.
What does that mean, equitable?
we wouldn't have a significant difference between complications in, for example, black mothers in pregnancy.
Why did you use the word equitable instead of equal?
Well, because equity has to do with outcome, and equal has to do with just access, I believe.
Okay, I'll just go for it.
Yeah, and so if you were to, when you control for socioeconomic status, comorbidities, all the other, factors that we control for, and we looked at race and we saw that there were equal outcomes, then I could say that, it's probably, we've done away with those, systematic racism.
So let me ask you a question, and if my reasoning is in error, let me know. Why would one assume that a disparity in outcome was due to a systemic factor as opposed to something else? And I could rattle those off if you wanted. Why would disparities in outcome have to be rooted systemically as opposed to, I don't know, eating a lot of pasta or something, or not exercising, or not having? Why would that be?
Yeah, so that's what I mean by controlling for confounding variables. If you control for dietary or culture, that is one of the things that when we do study these things, we do control for socioeconomic status. And so even when you control for socioeconomic status, we still see these disparities, and that's because. But
why would you assume that the disparities are due to systems as opposed to cultures? I'm thinking Amy Chu's Curse of the Tiger Mother, or I'm assuming certain specifically Indian Americans, not Native Americans, or cold climate Asians. Why would you assume, or Ashkenazi Jews, why would you assume that those disparities were causally attributable to a system as opposed to a set of practices, not ubiquitously, from people in the culture, but by and large that you could point to the mode, if you will, to borrow terms from statistics.
Yeah, well, because we can point to these things. We can point to, the origin of spirometry in racism, right? The person who created spirometry was a slave owner and invented the system explicitly to demonstrate that black people had weaker lungs. And, there has not been a adequate kind of retribution. We still have that mathematical formula with that little, multiply, that little.
What do you mean by retribution?
We haven't fixed that. We've just it is something that we don't have a biological underpinning for, and we haven't rectified it, and we haven't changed it because that's just how the formula is. That's how they've been practicing for a very long time, and so.
So that would be an example of a system.
Yeah, exactly. That's
right.
what I mean.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's an example of a system. But what about other disparities? Do you think that all disparities in racial outcome are due causally to systems?
Yeah, I mean, well, there could also be individuals with racism,
okay.
But I'm saying that
she was nodding her head. I'm going to get to her.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Can you tell us why? Here, I'm going to give you this.
Yes, as you were stating before, when we do studies on these inequalities, inequities, we control for all of these random cultural factors or any of that other stuff, and we still see that these things are underlined. And you're also...
What do you mean, these things?
We still see the disparities even when you control for culture or eating habits or diet or whatever. We still see them. And then also you keep saying culture, there is one culture of all black people. There isn't. So there's no way for you to fit everyone that's being disadvantaged into a single similarity other than the fact that they have a different race.
Okay. So now I think I understand. So the disparity in outcome, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please tell me if I understand this correctly. The disparity in outcome has to be due to a system because culture itself is broadly illusory. There's no culture at which, for example, Sephardic Jews participate. So therefore, if there are a disparity in outcome among Sephardic Jews, causally it would have to be the system that was responsible for the production of the disparities as opposed to any practice among the people, because you can't say that those people, by and large, participate in a common practice.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes. For example, he was talking about the 3 times higher mortality rate for black mothers. They see that in the highest educated black women who come from 6 figures, who had every advantage in life, and they also see it in this low socioeconomic immigrants that this English is their second language. It's seen on the broad spectrum of everyone, and the only thing they have in common is that they have darker skin complexion. There is no other group that you could fit them in other than that.
So how would we conduct, so you guys are all scientists broadly, physicians specifically, so how would we conduct a test to figure out if the disparities we see, to what extent they can be attributable to practices, if we don't like the word culture?
Yes. So they did a study, and they saw the rates of death within black mothers with a black doctor versus black mothers with a non-black doctor, and they saw there was no disparities when you had a black doctor, someone who related to you and believed your pain and took care of you, versus someone who wasn't black. So that's how they saw it. Doctors with the same we assume that every doctor had the same training in this company, and they're all on the same level of smartness. Yeah. And so if we're seeing that when you have a doctor that looks like you survive more versus someone who doesn't look like you, and the reasons why you're normally not surviving is because...
What do you mean look like you?
Look like you color-wise, because we're talking about race here, systemically racist. So who looks like you with the same race, when they see that they live more than someone who doesn't, and then they start listing the reasons on why this happened, you start seeing the only reason this could have been was because of systemic racism.
Okay, thanks. Did you want to add, we're really running out of time. Did you want to add anything real quick?
I agree with my colleagues. So, and, since we're running out of time, I will defer to their wisdom.
Okay. Couple things. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you, or any final points that you want to make? I want to make sure you have an opportunity to be heard.
I guess the one last thing that I'll say is that we're also seeing that the efforts that are being made, like I gave an example of like derm textbooks, there isn't a lot of representation.
Is that your specialty, dermatology?
Let's hope. Ask me after step 2. Okay. But
fair enough.
But we're seeing that efforts by organizations like the Skin and Color Society, textbooks on ethnic dermatology, there is like demonstrated improvements in outcomes and equity. Like outcomes are being evened out when we address lack of representation.
If we had time, I would reset this to equity, but we don't. We have 4 minutes. Do you want to comment on anything?
Yeah.
I'll have to hold this because we're running late.
Sorry. I would say that in terms of the systemic things that are in place, like the EGFR and the derm textbook, they're definitely getting better at making them more, like, less biased. But when it comes to people's individual mindsets, that's like a different story, and it's really hard to take that out of someone, and it's also hard to prove that that is why something is happening. So, like, I feel like the systemic part is getting better, but now the individualized aspect of racism in individual physicians, especially longer practicing ones, is not doing anything.
Longer practicing ones, do you mean older ones? Is that a euphemism for age?
Yes.
Okay. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah. So again, medical access, really important. You'll notice that a lot of medical deserts exist where there are larger communities of color, and that makes a physician less likely to want to practice there, which then automatically denies those people the benefit of fast care. They generally are the ones where people are going for like a rotation for a few months, and then they're like, oh, check the rural off the list. So yeah, just building on that, but I have to go to my 1 p.m.
Okay, so look, real quick, while we go, thanks everybody, thanks, appreciate it. Does everybody see how this exercise can help you calibrate? In an ideal world, what you'd do is you'd have other people and you'd listen to their reasons. By the way, that's why intellectual and ideological, particularly ideological diversity, is vital, because you can listen to the reasons of people and then you can watch them calibrate their beliefs in real time. Okay, thanks everybody. If you need to go to the one, if you don't, we're going to stay here. We're going to do this again, and instead of me doing it, one of you is going to do it, and I'm going to guide you through the process. All right, Reed, what's the one that got the third number of votes? Okay. Minors should be allowed to receive gender-affirming care without parental notification. Okay. And we're going to look at word definition. And you can see in real time, Reed is going to, that's Reed over there, Reed and Travis, and we just met today. What's your name again? Jerry. So you can see in real time when Reed will post those. Green, he'll post them differently in terms of the claims, et cetera. So who would like to go on the line for this, and then who would like to do what I did to facilitate it? Who wants to facilitate it? Okay, come on down, first hand I saw. If nobody goes on the line, I guess I can go on the line, but we'll see. I found that the more controversial the claim, the less likely are people to go on the line or play the game. Who wants to do this? You don't have to if you don't want to. You want to do it? Oh, awesome. Anybody else? Ah, cool. That's 2. Excellent. Anybody else? Did you want to do it? Oh, cool. Excellent. All right. So come here. I'll tell you what to do. It's pretty straightforward. So usually you'd repeat the rules of the game, but you don't need to repeat the rules of the game because we've done it twice, and you're medical students.
Although I think they're out of height order.
See that? Look, you're already doing your job. Okay, height order. So put them in height order.
All right, I think you have to come back in front.
Okay, so make sure the only rule you have to repeat is you have to tell them to move at the same time because you don't want to bias the outcome.
All right.
All right, and then so they're going to go to a line. So in the ideal world, they'll go to different lines. If not, what can you do? Ask them why they believe it. Probe the beliefs a little bit. So say maybe like a counterexample, like it doesn't matter where they go on the line. What about this? What about this? If they wind up on different lines, make sure that the people on one end speak directly to the people on the other end. If they wind up on different lines, ask them what it would take to change their mind, and then go to the other person and say, can you give them that? Can you give them that piece of evidence? If they wind up on the same side, like we get a lot of people agreeing, ask them what it would take, what piece of evidence or data would cause them to move to the strongly agree, what piece of evidence or data would move them to the slightly disagree. There's 2 other things you can do if you want. You can say, I'm going to give you a last word, what would you like to say? Now your job when you do this is to be as neutral as possible. So they should not know what you believe. So I didn't do this because we ran out of time, but I usually ask people, what line do you think I'd be on? And then I walk to the line. You know that you will be successful if people choose the wrong line. Got it? Okay, so you're completely neutral. So no matter where anybody is, you have to ask the hard questions. Okay.
Hello. All right, so everyone move on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Repeat the claim.
Oh, and the claim, of course, was minors should be allowed to receive gender-affirming care without parental notification. So I'll start over here, Elizabeth. So can you tell me about why you hold this belief?
Sure. So I think individual autonomy is crucial, and I think there are other examples of it that I can bring up, not necessarily in this, but for example with contraception, it is prescribed to minors regardless of parental awareness, and that's generally done just to preserve their safety and things like that. The reason why I didn't agree more is that I think it could potentially be very dangerous if the parents aren't aware of it. It can also be dangerous, in another sense, in that they wouldn't agree with it if they did know. So it's very complicated, but it can be dangerous to the health of the child or the minor.
Can you elaborate more on the danger to the minor?
Right. So it's just, I'm not, too well versed in this subject specifically. But just if they're receiving these treatments, which can be pretty aggressive, hormonal treatments and things like that, if the parents aren't aware of that, aren't aware of the side effects, aren't aware of the complications, that could present a danger to the child.
Okay, thanks for sharing. All right, I'll move over to here, to the agree side. So start with you, Catherine. Can you say why you agreed with this?
I think kind of similar reasoning. I didn't know whether to go slightly or strongly because I think, again, it varies massively based on the case. When they say minors, that's kind of anyone under 18, so it's like how young? Because there's different forms of gender-affirming care. So pre-puberty, you can do binding if it's like female to male or other types. And gender-affirming care can even just be something as easy as like using the right pronouns if the parents are out of the room, if they're more comfortable with like they-them pronouns. So I think when it comes to just like actually affirming care in terms of just talking and stuff, strongly agree. Some of the medications can have interactions, some of them can have more dangers. I know transitioning on T can be something that causes some side effects and could interact with other medications. And so I think it might be important for parents to know in case like they break their leg and it's like what kind of treatment they get in the ER might differ. So I think that might be one case where it could be a little risky. Also in cases where parents would not be supportive of their kids, and there are a lot of cases where kids have become homeless because parents reject their gender identity. I actually worked with a lot of LGBTQ plus youth. 2 of them had been kicked out on the streets because of their gender and or sexual identity, and so, and that was the parents were the danger in that case, not just the medications.
So you mentioned stuff about different modes of care. So you said using proper pronouns, binding, and then something about medications. Mm-hmm. Are you here on agree for care as a whole or for a specific mode of care? Like if you had the opportunity to only pick out a single mode of care using proper pronouns for a patient, where would you stand?
Oh, strongly agree. There's no medical harm if I say the pronoun that makes them comfortable. There's a lot of things I think physicians should do in order to make their patients feel as welcomed and heard as a person. And so saying their proper pronouns is like kind of the least you could do.
Okay, so it's more of just a general, out of the entire continuum of care, you're just taking the agree stance then.
Yeah, and when you factor in, binding can be dangerous when it comes to developing trust because it could actually lead to malformations. So that one can be riskier. Because if you bind too tight, there are sometimes issues with breathing.
Okay, hold on, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to throw. So now you take the reasons. That she gave, and in your mind, do you think that the reasons she gave justify the line that she's on?
Honestly, I kind of agree with the reasons that she's giving because she's kind of on the fence. Again, it's like the whole continuum of care thing. Like she's very strongly for some, and it seems like she's more slightly for others. So like it seems almost like she's trying to average out.
So do you think that the reason she offered warrants her standing on the agree line? Because it seemed to me, usually I don't make this so transparent, but I'm trying to teach you how to do this. It seemed to me that the reasons that she gave, she could, if you can think you can nudge somebody, try to nudge them any way you want. Ask her why the reason she gave does not put her on the strongly agree. Oh, and remember, if you need help, you can just look at the board there.
Oh, right.
So that's one thing I do. And then remember, she's waiting too, so get to her at some point here.
Yeah. So I will quickly ask you that question. Your reasons that you gave, why are you not there with Elizabeth, and why are you not over here?
I mean, in cases where the parents would be supportive, I think it'd be good for them to know. And I think it also is the question of how young. So I think that is an important discussion. I think, at least in terms of medical licensure and like the current state of legality as is, I'm not sure you can give hormonal treatment to someone under 18 without parental permission. And so I think the strongly agree is because like I would like to be affirming, but I would also not like to lose my license. And I think it's important to change it systemically instead of just trying to kind of go all vigilante medicine.
More systems. Okay, moving back. Talk to Maggie. Maggie, why are you in agree?
Ultimately, my biggest push for agree was that your idea of your own personal gender is pretty much formed by the age of 3. So for the majority of minors who have an understanding that they are not the gender that they feel that they are presenting as, that is something that is a long time coming, in the same way that I was born a female and identify as a cisgendered female. I've always identified with that. So the idea that someone might identify with a different gender just at a young age is still viable in my understanding. And then the only reason I'm here with agree rather than strongly agree is that, again, with the vast majority of gender affirming care being kind of a broad term, and like ultimately the patient's safety, I think is like foremost. So I think I could be pushed, but I think in taking into account patient safety, both understanding their parent situation, but also understanding the risks and benefits of what gender-affirming care means, that those play into that decision.
Okay, so don't go anywhere. So they both said something that I found interesting, and when you do this, you can put your own spin, but I'm just helping you the first time. They both said, I think you said 2 or 3 times, it depends what you mean by a minor and how young. Mm-hmm. So you can reset the claim anytime. So let's reset the claim, send everybody, go back to neutral, and then do the claim instead of minors, because she's right, technically a minor is someone under 18. Individuals 8 years old and under, individuals 8 and below should be allowed to receive gender-affirming care without parental notification. So you can set, I mean, I just picked 8, but that's a 10-year difference, so I thought it'd be good. So,
that's fair.
Yes.
All right, with this new age, I'd like you guys to go on the count of 3. So 1, 2, 3. All right, so we've actually had a bit of a shift, and I'll start with you, Maggie.
All right. I know I did say that your idea of gender is typically set by the age of 3. So obviously an 8-year-old has the capacity to understand that their gender may or may not be equal to the gender that they were born with or the sex that they were born with. However, when taking medical care into this, obviously using the correct pronouns, that's something that's an easy change, but taking into account actual medical care, that 8 and under is not a significant, your brain is not fully formed enough for you to make that decision on medical care for yourself. So if it is, I would like to present as a man or a woman, that's fine, but medical care, I feel needs to have an adult helping you or guiding you in those decisions.
So we talked about medical care, but we also mentioned just affirmation and other words and just acknowledging. So where would you stand on maybe using pronouns that an 8-year-old would prefer if they're presenting as male, but they prefer to use female pronouns?
Oh, with pronouns, I'd be in strongly agree. If that's what they have, if that would help me to improve my therapeutic alliance with the patient, absolutely.
Okay, so is it an issue with the assent and the age? 8 years old, you just don't believe the assent is at that capacity?
Yeah, have you seen a second grader recently?
That is good, fair. That's pretty fair, yeah.
It's more like medical treatment. I don't think that they have the capacity to understand the risks and benefits associated and therefore can't make those decisions for themselves.
Okay. All right, so we'll move over here. Elizabeth, you didn't move at all.
I didn't. I'm not sure if that was the right decision. I think the statement could be amended because, like we were saying before, gender-affirming care is such a spectrum, and it's just completely different whether you're giving hormones to an 8-year-old versus you're calling them by a certain pronoun that they would prefer. So, yeah, that's kind of why I didn't change my standpoint. It would depend.
So real quick, so she said something good. Not that anybody else didn't. She said there's a huge spectrum, breast binding hormones, etc. So you're the boss. So if you want to take what she said and run with it, you can do it. I mean, you can do anything you want. You could say individuals 8 and below should be allowed to receive, hormones or whatever. So you can reset at any time. But before you reset it every time, make sure you give everybody an opportunity to speak to this one issue. Yeah. So if someone says something in the process that you're like, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. That's pretty cool. Just reset them and start again.
Okay. So you were talking about the whole spectrum of care and just being
Yeah, I just mean in terms of the posing the question, you could potentially, after we all speak, we could change the question to something more specific, hormones or just, pronoun affirming care.
That's fair. And you also moved, Catherine, just one shift down?
Yeah, I mean, I think the standard practice is you don't start giving hormone therapy until approximately puberty or right beforehand. 8 is not that age, and so I feel like gender-affirming care would be pretty simple at that point because it is just kind of pronouns and probably presentation. And at that point, like it will be, the hard part is like if you're in a pediatric facility, the parents will be in the room if they are 8 years old. I don't think there's really going to be a circumstance where you're not going to have the parents in the room at that age. I was thinking more just the practicality. Like, you're not going to start having puberty-related changes until, on average, after 10, and that's sometimes when the conversation about hormone replacement therapy starts. But at 8, like, it's kind of young. At that point, you can just like wear whatever clothes you're comfortable with, use whatever pronouns you're comfortable with. And so in that case, I don't even know how you would get away with no parental notification because they're probably always in the room.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So right around like, I forgot when, it was like 14 is when you start like seeing if the patient wants to talk without the parent being in the room and the parent can say yes or no. So if we had changed the age to 14, so could we change the question to maybe being, more that if a teenager requests, do you need to notify the parent if the teenager requests to gender-affirming care at 14? Or actually, that question was appropriate. I didn't read it fully. My bad.
Do we go back to neutral?
Everyone back to neutral. And then I'm sure everyone's getting a little tired of standing and my ranting. All right, so with this question, 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so. Oh, wait. Wait, do we reset? Reset, okay.
I think you have to read it aloud.
Okay. Teenagers 14 to 17 years old should be allowed to receive hormonal and surgical gender-affirming care without parental notification. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so start with you, Catherine.
It was an and statement, and I don't agree with both. Surgical is too early for that age, and also surgery without parental notification, I think, is a very different. One of the big things we do as physicians is like you balance net benefit to the patients with net harm, and at that age, the net harm could outweigh the net benefits. And I think at that point, the parents need to be involved in the discussion because surgery is something that is very risky. There's a lot of post-op procedures. There's also actually a lot of pain risk. So pain management post-surgery, you'll need to diagnose opioids, and there actually is like more opioid use disorder in people who undergo trans-affirming surgeries, just because you need to prescribe
Pain
it.
management. Yeah.
And I don't think kids should be taking those kinds of medications without parents who can be like checking in.
So parsing this question apart, so what part was more hesitation for you, the receiving hormonal or the surgical gender? And where would you stand for either one, just like split?
I think secret surgery would probably under the disagree pile. Hormonal, I would go for slightly or neutral. I think I would want to actually, it depends on what I know, but I'd probably want them to like see a psychiatrist and like actually go through the proper channels first. I don't want to be the one deciding if they can give consent at that age. Especially 14, you'd really want to make sure they actually know what they're committing to, whether they understand the full, like, what could happen with hormonal therapy.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. And then I'll move over here. So you guys, still in the slightly neutral, or slightly agree. Let me move on this side. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Sure. So actually, I agree with a lot of what Catherine said. It's a great point that surgery is risky. I think it's also important to note just the higher risk of suicide and mood disorders and things like that in the trans community, and also among teenagers specifically. So I think that's kind of what led me to go with slightly agree. Of course, I do agree that it should be through the proper channel. So no, like unconsulted surgery would, of course, get a psychiatrist involved, get like a social worker potentially involved. But the previous things I said also stand in that it is more difficult for parents to potentially care for their children if they're not aware that they're having these procedures.
Okay. Something that both of you guys have mentioned is the parental notification and desiring for it to go through the proper channels. Like, when does not providing parental notification go through the proper channels? Because both of you have said we want to do things properly, but this question is explicitly saying without parental notification. When is that appropriate? I'll start with you, Elizabeth.
Okay, so in terms of properly providing, the necessary support is just kind of looking out for any factors. So like I said, the psychiatrist, something like that would be beneficial because you're addressing all the different points, all the different impacts, and the social worker, how this would affect your family dynamic. You don't necessarily have to get the parent involved in order for the child to have a certain position and a certain opinion on, what's the fallout going to be from this procedure.
Okay, Anne?
I may have zoned out regarding the question. Could you repeat the question?
So we're talking a lot about the proper channels and making sure everything is done by the book. But part of the question is providing this care without parental notification, which might not go through the proper channels. So can you give an example where you wouldn't provide, you would provide this care without the parental notification? Like, how could you do that, but still in a proper way?
I mean, I think you could give hormonal treatment. It's the same thing where, I think certain minors are allowed to have certain medical procedures done without telling their parents. There is kind of that confidentiality. Surgery, I think, is a whole different ballgame. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll move back to Maggie and probably wrap things up.
Yeah, I think ultimately we're all here on the risk-benefit ratio is what we're really looking at. So I agree with Kat that, surgery without parental notification is pretty extreme, especially if in this situation they are still living within the parent's home. So again, it's really looking at safety. Okay, so is the safety to the patient more at risk from having a secret surgery? Or is it more at risk from their gender dysphoria and the associated risks of depression and suicide? So in the case of surgery, there's a potential that they are at a greater imminent risk from having the surgery than they are from their dysphoria, and therefore when you weigh those against each other, you fall on a different part of the spectrum. So I was here more because of the hormonal affirming care, because the risk benefit ratio is different there.
Okay.
So now, you got everybody's, I assume you understand everything, right? And if you ever don't understand, just ask somebody. Always put the burden of understanding on yourself. Say, I'm not clear. I want to make sure I get this right. And so then they'll repeat it. And then you repeat it back to them so they make sure. So you did a great job. So you have a good idea of where everybody's beliefs. And you have a good idea of why they're standing on the line they're standing on, right? And if you ever thought that the reasons that they gave were, more neutral or more this way, you'd ask them why are you on slightly agree rather than agree? And the final question, and you can front load this if you want, is what would it take to change your mind? What would it take for you to move one line to the left or one line to the right? And again, remember, when you ask someone, we've reset the question 3 times now, and we've reset the question based upon things that people have said, so we can keep honing the question down. So you have 3 final questions. Can you keep all these things in your mind? I'm amazed by servers when you go to a restaurant, the whole table, and they remember all this stuff. Is what would it take for you to move one line to the left or one line to the right? Is there anything I should have asked but I didn't ask? And what line do you think I would be on? You got those?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll start with you, Maggie. You're here. What's going to move you there, and what's going to move you over here?
I would move closer to agree if we're specifically talking about hormonal treatment, and closer to disagree if we were talking about surgical treatment exclusively.
That's fair. So you've talked pretty at length at why they each are pretty different. So I think that's a pretty understandable position. And then move over to you, Elizabeth.
Took the words right out of my mouth. I think this conversation and specifically focusing on the and aspect and, surgical, definitely moving closer to neutral or even slightly disagree.
Mm-hmm. So I guess with both of you, if these surgeries were somehow 100% success, pain was not going to be a long-term issue, these patients were not going to have any issues with long-term complications, would that assuage you from moving back down, or would you move up here? Like if you knew these surgeries were going to be 100% success rate, no long-term complications.
I would be less likely to move towards disagree. I still don't know if I would go to agree, just because of the risks associated with anesthesia. Mm-hmm. But I'd maybe fall into the neutral category at that point.
So if there are no risks?
I guess if there are no risks, then your risk-benefit ratio, your benefits outweigh your risks. If there are no risks, then I'm in the
No medical risks.
Right.
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 Yeah, I mean, I wish we had 100% perfect surgeries for everything. I'd probably move to agree.
That's fair. And talking to you, Catherine, you were here at neutral. What would move you to slightly agree and slightly disagree?
I'd want to know the parental situation, like if they're just not like it. If the parents are not going to support them afterwards, I'd be nervous to have them go through with hormonal treatment and surgery if it means like they might lose their support system. Like one of the major things you have to consider with patients is like, who are they coming home to? Like, will they be safe when they get home? And I would never want to do anything that could put a patient in danger. And if they're in a dangerous household that is just like would not support them afterwards, then I think that's still like, even if there's no medical risk, like the parents could be a problem.
So medical risks are the same. There's no risk of the parents disowning their children. Where do you move?
I mean, in that case, then like I'd probably just counsel the patient, like, let's just involve your parents.
Okay, good point. Yeah, good point.
So I think I'd probably, it depends. At that point, I'd probably say, like, if you're 17, I'd be like, wait till you're 18. And then there's also the cost consideration, because we don't live in a perfect society where, like, these things are actually covered by Medicare. And if they ever want to go into the military, these surgeries are not provided and actually are explicitly not covered by the military insurance plans. So reality is complicated. Saying yes is, you deal with the patient as the complex person that they are.
Okay. I forgot the second question.
Whether you would, where we think you are.
Oh, that's the third one.
Oh, that's what we're running late. Just ask them, because we only have 4 more minutes. Ask them where they think you are.
Where do you guys think I am?
Probably agree on the first one.
Yeah, I was able to agree on the first one. What about
the first question, or just not this one?
not this one? Where am I on this one?
This one?
See, already it's a success because they had to think about it, right?
Yeah.
Also, we have a benefit of knowing Kevin.
We do.
Yeah.
He is a little indecisive. He'd definitely be a neutral.
I guess I would be somewhere between these two for the second question. There's a lot of things to keep in mind for this.
Yeah, you did a great job. Seriously, you did a great job. Thank them. So one of the things that you did, I just want to say while I have you up here, one of the things you did is you identified the reasons that they gave, and a theme emerged that the surgery there were potential complications. So when you do things like this, when you ask people about why they believe things, often the reason that they give is not the actual reason that they disagree. So if you remove the reason, you just ask them if they still disagree. And that's why that question was so potent. Because you said to them, okay, so let's remove the reason, let's remove the idea that surgery is risky. You know, I like to say we can wave a magic wand, but in a medical context, probably not a good idea. But, you know, you have some kind of 20 years or 50 years, AI or whatever, and you take out the risk, then where would you move? If nobody moves, that means that the reason that they gave was not the reason that they really why they hold the belief. But if everybody moved as a consequence of that, then you know that at least to some degree that's the reason. So part of the thing, if you ever do this with kids or whatever, you need to figure out if the reasons they give are the reasons that they actually believe the claim. And that question was excellent. So you did a great job. And no one knew where you stood, right? You see how they pause and say that's what you want every time. So great, thanks. Great. Okay, we have 2 minutes, 1 minute left. I'm going to open up. Anybody have any general questions? Yeah, hi.
Where did you stand on each of the topics?
Where did I stand on which one?
On, like, not just this question, but the previous questions that we asked.
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to know what the questions were. I don't remember what the... I would stand on a disagree.
On disagree?
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the other one?
Abortion should be allowed in the third trimester. Legal.
Yeah, I think my own belief is abortion should be allowed up to the first trimester, no questions asked, and then there has to be something endangering the mother's life or something like that, but not just willy-nilly.
And then this question?
Well, there were three, or were there four? What was the first one?
Gender-affirming care without parental consent, minors.
Yeah, I'm opposed to gender-affirming care for people under 18 with or without parental consent. Above 18, you can do anything you want. But I think that and I could give you my reason for that, but that's where I would have stood on the strongly disagree to that. And so that's also really important for why you need ideological diversity. Because if you don't, you just fall down an echo chamber where everybody believes the same thing. So it's a way to, it's a kind of hypothesis testing or to test your beliefs. You know, you walk in here and you see the equity and you see all this stuff, but, and then oh, he's gone now. You know, I thought it was really interesting how he used the word equity and equality as a synonym. They're just not synonyms, but I thought that was really interesting. But one of the reasons that you need ideological diversity, this would have been really interesting if you had people standing on the strongly disagree line and then you listened to their reasons and then we calibrated the beliefs according to what those reasons are. Cass Sunstein and others have done some really interesting work in what promotes a kind of radicalism when you get these echo chambers. Oh, here he is. Hi. We just talked about you. Oh, I just talked about you. So the idea would be you can... The idea of this is not to have a uniformity of agreement where everyone stands on the same line. One of the ideas, beside calibrating the confidence in your belief to the evidence and the reason you have for the belief, is that these kind of communicative interactions that you have with people, they shouldn't be to force consensus, they should be to mutually understand the other person. So if you can understand but not agree with the reasons that people have, you're much less likely to demonize them. You're much less likely to other them. And you're also much more likely to put a check on your own beliefs, right? Because if everybody in your peer group and your social group and your institution has certain governing values, certain lodestars, you're much more likely to buy into the acceptance of those values without kind of demanding that without demanding that one of those final questions, the disconfirmations, right? What would it take you to change your mind? And if you have someone who is not in ideological agreement with what you think, you can ask them, so you say, okay, so what would it take to change your mind on this? It's very difficult to do that if everybody's on the strongly agree. You say, well, what would it take to change your mind? They tell you what it would take, and then you ask this person, is that reasonable? Is the thing that they said that would, for gender-affirming care for minors, is it reasonable? And they say yes or no. Most of the time they say yes. And you say, can you provide that? Can you provide the evidence that they're looking for to move them to the agree line? Not to the, slightly disagree, just simply one line over. And it's those kind of communities of knowledge seeking and communities of inquiry where you can calibrate your confidence to your belief accordingly, as opposed to whatever the institutional milieu in which you happen to find yourselves. Like that kind of intellectual diversity challenges and questions people, as opposed to just running with what's morally fashionable or whatever the orthodoxy is. Does that answer your question? Cool. Hey.
Did anything anyone say today move you one line?
Yeah, him. You, Sean. Oh, I try not to use people's names because when the video goes out and such, I try not to. Sometimes we bleep them out, but yeah, I think some of the things that he said, some of the things he said, certainly gave me pause. And one of the things I kind of made a note to myself in my notes was to go back and review the video and fact check what he said. About dermatology, about the skincare, et cetera. And when I did that, the question is the evidence that he provided me was sufficient to recalibrate my beliefs? I think it would be yes, but I don't want to make that decision capriciously. I really have to look at what the data is. And when I look at the data, what I do is I look at the methods of a study. To the methods, what's the N, et cetera. Yeah, hi.
Yeah, I can, I know what studies Ariel was talking about too, so I can like send you a link. Yeah, that'd
be great. Because, so the other thing is, I would like to do whatever I can to influence the culture, and the culture is not what line you should be standing on, which I know is not morally fashionable to say, but the culture should be, we need to promote a willingness to change one's mind, and we need to make that a virtue. And right now, it's almost the opposite of what we have now. So I don't want to be wrong about a belief for even an instant more, as a philosopher says, one more moment than I have to be. So if I can be provided with evidence to change my mind, I would certainly do that. My wife's a physician. She does addiction medicine. She's an internist. That's where I came up with the Narcan question. But so when I hear things like that, I'd like to take them and think about them. And I think we have a pervading culture right now, in a suite of assumptions that goes with that there are right answers to moral questions, there are right orthodoxies, there are right answers to the questions of equity. I don't believe that's true. I believe that we work these things out in discourse with people who disagree with us, so we can kind of keep a reality check on the things we believe. Anybody else have any questions, thoughts? Yeah, hi.
Do you find when you do this with people of different ages, like, do people like that are older tend to change less versus younger people?
I'm looking at my team. Okay, so the question is, do people who are older, are they more or less likely to change their mind? I have a very disappointing answer for you, but it's an honest answer, so I'm going to give it anyway. The number one factor that will determine whether or not someone will do this, and I'm going to Australia, we just got back from Puerto Rico, I did Hungary and Romania, you can see those videos on my YouTube channel. The number one factor that will determine whether or not someone will engage this is their age. So younger people, they'll literally drive on their bikes and get off their bikes to play. Then the problem is that legally I can't do this if someone is under 18. So I have to say no to, and then there's we got hordes of people, young people want to play. Old people, there's literally nothing I can do. So I don't, the answer to your question is I don't know, because they won't do this. I think a lot of it is that they're camera shy, I think. Anybody else? Yeah, hi.
Did we land where you expected before you met us?
Yes. Yeah, I did, and I specifically don't research or do anything beforehand, but I could tell when I walked in the building, I had a strong feeling where people would land. The only thing that surprised me in terms of where you landed was when we changed the age to 8. I think that was surprising to me. I was surprised that more people didn't go to the disagree. But yeah, in general, I think the answer is yeah. And I think that the reasons people gave were quite good. I think that they were thoughtful. I think that they were well evidenced. But again, and I offer this with total sincerity to you, with complete sincerity, you can never really be sure that those reasons are sufficient to justify your confidence unless you have someone trying to poke holes at them, right? As Feynman said, the easiest person to fool is yourself. And if you're in your epistemic landscape, if you're only drawing from data that supports your conclusion, you have to have ideological diversity. You have to have someone say, well, wait a second, what about this? Or what about this study? And again, if your professors won't even show you what those studies are because they're feared that they'll be brought up by the diversity office or whatever, the injustice that's committed, it's an epistemic injustice against you, because then you've artificially inflated the confidence in a belief beyond the warrant of the evidence you have, because you haven't had an opportunity to look at other domains of thought, like other contradictory pieces of evidence or thinkers or scholars, etc. So again, I think that's a really unfortunate position in which we find ourselves in institutions. But that's also why when you do this, it's just vital to maintain your neutrality. The moment someone has even the slightest hint of where you are, you've compromised the integrity of the exercise. Yeah, hi.
This is less of a question, I guess, and more of a comment. Like, I feel that we do at this school definitely have individuals that would land on different areas of the spectrum. But I think that not the culture necessarily at this school, but just the culture in our age range in general at this point, especially on social media, is so much that we're not willing to hear people with ideological differences, and therefore those people are scared. Like, I made the joke earlier, like, oh, am I going to be canceled for participating?
Right.
So there's that fear of, if I participate and share my opinion on this,
100%.
that I will have some social retribution because of it.
100%. Thank you so much for saying that. And that's why if you value truth in your life and you want to believe true things, you have several choices in your young lives. I have many years on everybody in here. You have to make certain choices in your life, right? And so if you really want to not only have true beliefs, but if you want to be a good physician and you want to make sure that you're doing right by your patients, it really isn't, a few things are incumbent upon you. The first thing that's incumbent upon you is you have to be willing to, the Greeks call it parrhesia, to speak truth in the face of danger. The problem with a lot of these exercises is just exactly what you said. We've created conditions of fear in our institutions such that even if some people wanted to stand on the strongly disagree, they wouldn't, for fear of retribution, for fear of cancellation, etc. And as long as you have that, you have a hindrance or a barrier to any mechanism or process that would allow people to increase the number of true beliefs they have and decrease the number of false beliefs. So, cutting through that culture of fear is a big thing. And, some of it, it's like the pronouns in the bio. Some of it's a kind of signaling, right? Some of it is not a signaling. So it's an enormous problem when an institution has in my own personal experience, I'm not going to say I'm a victim or anything, but I have been subject to many diversity tribunals for asking for evidence. What is the evidence for something? Not even for stating an opinion, just for asking what the evidence is for something. And I've been accused of microaggressions, et cetera. But the idea is when you create a culture of fear, to the extent that the culture of fear comes to dominate the institution, that is the direct degree to which the truth as the North Star of that institution is compromised. So in an ideal world, everybody would be able, this is what I'm going to talk about in my talk. When is it? I think it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow, right? This is one of the things I'm going to talk about in my talk. It should not matter in terms of your friendship where someone stands on this line. Now, I don't mean to say to you that there aren't deal breakers, right? Of course there are deal breakers for you in whatever your relationship is, but these are mere political, ideological disagreements that doesn't mean you're a bad person. I mean, it could just mean that someone's mistaken and you could be the one who's mistaken. And to the extent that one hasn't actively sought out disconfirming pieces of data, to the extent that that's the case, it's more likely that it's you, because the confidence that you will place in those beliefs is not warranted on the basis of the evidence. So even if someone does have a difference of opinion, I would argue that's not a reason not to talk to them. It's not a reason to cancel them. It's not a reason to ostracize them. If anything, it's more of a reason to civilly ask, well, why do you believe that? Because if they know something you don't know, why wouldn't you want to know it? I mean, I'd want to know it. Yeah.
Hi guys, as the host, I'd like to say something as well. Like what you were saying, Maggie, personally, I've been through some instances of cancellations. I am an ex-Muslim, meaning I left a religion for personal differences, and speaking out on my disagreements with the religion has caused me to lose friends. I've had a lot of things said about me, but the moral of the story is I think it's just important to be able to speak freely about what you think. If we can't freely play with words and ideas, then we cannot progress as a society. And that's why I brought Peter to our school to have this type of event. And that's why a couple of our classmates are trying to start a bioethics club so that we can create an atmosphere, which I think our school already has. We do a great job of being able to speak freely here. But overall, I think this is crucial in having a healthy culture that's just able to have disagreements.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I want to say just a couple more things in closing. What a sad, tragic state of affairs that this is considered a controversy. That what we did today is considered a controversy tells you that there's something sick about the culture. It tells you that we are not well. Yeah.
I do think a lot of the context is very different for future healthcare providers. Because I think if you asked kind of like, just like went to Disney and asked like people at Disney Springs, it's different. But I think everyone in this room, we're going to be deciding certain things that will change a person's health. And I never want to be the limiting factor.
Right.
I want it to be the science, or like I want to get a patient to where they want to be. And I never want to be the bias, the wall that says no. I want it to be something else. And so I think a lot of times when I'm very permissive, it's not because I like the thing, but it's because I never want to decide for someone else. And so I think, yeah. And so I think I think part of the difference in conversation is more how we speak in the medical profession and not just as like me as a person. And so I think a lot of the views were like as future physicians.
Yeah, and I think that's a good distinction. There is something I do find, like, you know, I'm 56, and when I grew up, my parents had friends of all different political beliefs, and some who didn't believe anything politically, and I remember those spirited discussions. It's an interesting book, The Big Sort, about how people are now dividing, and it's worse online because people divide into communities of belief, but if you don't have, just on that, if you don't have any friends who disagree with you, if like all your friends agree with you on everything, man, you need to get another friend set. Like you really need to you need to consider broadening your friend base. Now that doesn't mean you go out and find a Ku Klux Klan member, but it does mean that you should use those disagreements to foster healthy conversation and understanding. All right, cool. So I hope everybody got something from this. I hope you can use it. As you saw, it's very easy. This is not a particularly complicated thing to do. The only thing that you really need to do is to have a kind of integrity when you do this and really listen to somebody, repeat back to them, and then see if they're justified, their confidence is justified. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.